All right, we are rolling here. Boy, we got a really good internet connection today, and I am just rolling with it. This is great. Ah, man. Well, the topic for today in this stream for Temple of the Infinite Universe is, does God exist? And, we are not all going to agree on what I have to say here about this. There are a lot of people out there, diehard atheists, absolutely, positively do not believe that there is a God. There are folks out there who are more agnostic, and maybe a God, maybe there isn't. I don't know. I knew a guy once who was diehard atheist for the longest time. Then he had children, and then he got to the point where, I've seen so many weird things in my life that now I'm saying that maybe God does exist. And yeah, his life kind of changed and his point of view changed. And then there are other people out there born into churches, raised in religious households, maybe spiritual households, that say, yeah, of course God exists. Why? Because, well, that's what the Bible taught me. That's what we learned in Sunday school. That's what the priest, the minister, the imam, the whoever, that's what they kept telling me. God exists, so it's got to be true. And where I'm coming from here is, for the longest time, I considered myself to be a person of faith. And that faith told me, I was raised in a Catholic household, kind of a liberal Catholic household, back in the days when Vatican II was just getting started, and we made that transition from the Latin Rite Mass to the Mass being in the native language of the common person. And yeah, I was always raised with the understanding that yes, there is God, there is the Pope, there are the Kennedys, and I mean, yeah, this is stuff that we take seriously around here. Obviously, God does exist. We never question the existence of God. And for the longest time, I was in that boat, very much a person of faith that just believed in the existence of God. And if anybody asked me why, I would just say, well, it's obvious. That's what I was taught from an early age. That's what I learned how to believe. It's what was drilled into my mind at a very early age. And I mean, I really didn't have any good answer as to why I felt that God existed. It just was. And then I had a few experiences, some bad experiences that made me begin to question: does God really exist? And I got into some personal issues of faith, a crisis of faith, where, yeah, I could no longer really confidently say, yeah, there is a God. I really began to question. And this was uncomfortable for me because at the time that I began my process of questioning, I was in training to become a priest in the Catholic Church. And I later, because of this crisis of faith, I backed out of that. But I felt this call to ministry in some way. And I really felt like a walking paradox, because here I felt a very real draw to become a minister, to help other people, to talk about matters of faith. And at the same time, here am I questioning my faith. And for the longest time, I really couldn't be honest with myself about my lack of faith. And I would just go out there. I would kind of say the right things, you know, talk the talk, but not really walk the walk. My mind was in it, but my heart wasn't in it. And in my mind, I had all this theology that had been packed in there over the years, because I had gone to high school seminary in the Catholic Church. I'd gone to college, a good Catholic Benedictine college. I'd gone on to graduate school, in again, good Catholic graduate school, St. John's University. I had all this stuff packed into my head, And I had student loans coming out, every orifice practically. So yeah, I had to believe, right? I had all this knowledge. I had all this debt, uh, all these loans I had taken out to give me this knowledge. So obviously, I had to say that God existed. But when it came right down to it, I mean, I really had my doubts because, yeah, I had experienced a few things, a lot of negativity in my life that just had me question, could a God, a loving God, allow this kind of stuff to happen? If God is a loving God, then why is there evil in the world? So many different questions. And I really didn't know how to get the answers. The only answers I knew were, in my seminary trainings. And a lot of as I got further and further along in seminary, found out that a lot of my trainers, a lot of my teachers in seminary really doubted the existence of God too. As a matter of fact, I got into at one point I jumped ship. I went from the Catholic side of things to the Protestant side of Christianity. Got into a seminary, Protestant seminary, and was really somewhat surprised to find out that a lot of my teachers in that seminary were just coming out and just saying, they were socialists, they were communists, they were atheists, and they were just questioning the faith right there in the seminary classes. And at first I was kind of surprised. Later I was kind of shocked. And then later I began to find that they are asking the same questions that I have been asking, and none of us are getting answers. None of us are coming up with any answers, good, bad, or indifferent. We're just asking the questions, and nobody is really giving any solid answers. And finally, my crisis of faith just got to the point to where I had to leave my ministry. I was a senior pastor at that time at a Christian church, and so many things were happening to me, my family, to where I could just no longer go along with this God idea. And I still felt in my heart that, yeah, there is a spiritual presence. I couldn't define that presence, but I knew there had to be more to life than just me in this material world. There had to be something more to it than just what we see in the material world, and more than what I've been taught in all my seminary classes and all my theology classes. So, what I did, one of the problems that I was working on in my life was alcoholism. And that's really what softened up my mind to the point to where I knew things had to change. I had to change my life. My ability to concentrate was just out the window. I was drinking to the point of blackouts. It's a lot of things that people tell me I did while I was drunk, and I cannot deny it because I can't remember it. Just drinking to the point of blackout, getting just downright dangerous, and finally got to the point where I realized I had to quit drinking. And that was my turning point. A lot of people will think this is kind of funny, but with me, I found God when I decided to sober up. And yeah, my sobering up experience, I made a lot of progress my first 6 months in sobriety. My first year in sobriety, I felt like I'd gone a long way. But really, my sobering up experience really has taken me the last 17 years. I mean, I've been continually sobering up over the last 17 years. I haven't had a drop to drink in 17 years, but it's taken me that length of time to really get my heart, my mind, my gut all in alignment to where things are beginning to make sense. And one tool that I used in the sobering up process for me was meditation. I had been taught how to meditate in high school. high school seminary, they taught us how to do centering prayer, what was the acceptable form of meditation in that church at that time. So I knew a little bit about meditation, but I didn't really practice it for many, 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 many years. Picking up a beer can was really my favorite form of meditation. But when I finally got to the point where I realized that, the reason I've got so many questions about my life is that my life is just so screwed up because of what I've been doing to myself and to others and to my family. I just began to realize I have to set the bottle down. I have to get sober, and I have to learn how to see the universe through new eyes, through fresh eyes, through sober eyes. And so I put some time into meditation. I decided, as part of my recovery program, I was working with a sponsor that had been in AA ever since the early days of AA, back when AA was connected to the Oxford group. And he was big on meditation, but he didn't say anything to me about meditation. He let this kind of become my own idea. And so one day I just hit on this idea. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to spend the first hour of my day in meditation. I'm going to spend about a half hour of my lunch hour in meditation. And then I'm going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour in the evening in meditation. I had about 3 hours a day that I thought I could put into meditation. And to me, it made perfect sense because I was at the level previously in my drinking career where I was drinking about 8 hours a day. 8 hours a day, every day of the week was spent drinking. And I told myself, if you can spend 8 hours a day in your past life, the old Ralph, drinking, surely part of building up the new sober Ralph, you can take 3 hours a day and put it into the practice of meditation. And I told my sponsor this, and he was thrilled because he said, "You know what, Ralph, this is what the founders of AA did back in the early days, back when it was still connected to the Oxford group. This is what they did, and I'm happy to see you following this path." And he had never mentioned that to me before. He was just working with me, planting maybe a little suggestion here and there. And when I hit upon the idea of getting into a meditation practice, yeah, he was thrilled. And what I found in my meditation practice, I was at that point, I wasn't really sure that there was a God, but I knew there was a higher power. I wasn't sure what to call it, but I would just spend the first morning of the first hour of my day early in the morning. I'd be getting up like about 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, because I needed the time to meditate. And previously, I used to get up super early to drink. So for me, getting up super early to meditate, again, it made perfect sense. Because if I could get up early to kill myself through alcohol, now that I'm giving up alcohol, I can get up early to put some time into my own personal recovery. And so, yeah, 17 years ago, I got into the habit of getting up about 5 in the morning and spending my first hour of the day in meditation. And I wouldn't do anything major. I would sit down in a quiet room, 5 o'clock in the morning, there's a lot of quiet time. And I would light a candle, and then I would play some peaceful music, some John Michael Talbot chanting music. And it was very gentle music, and it was music that I could really kind of chill out to. And I would sit there comfortably in my chair, facing a candle. Sometimes I'd have my eyes open, looking at the candle. Sometimes I'd let my eyes close and just focus on the music. And all the time I would be focusing on my breath, just breathing in deeply, breathing out deeply, and just asking my higher power, give me the strength to remain sober for this one day, just one day at a time. Give me the strength that I need to stay sober for this day. And thank you. And I knew I needed peace. I needed serenity because emotionally, mentally, physically, I was a wreck. I was all over the place. And I didn't know where to turn to for help. You know, one of my other sponsors, I had three different sponsors in AA at that time. I had online AA groups. I had one guy I was meeting with in the physical world. And this one guy was a doctor, and he was saying, you know, Ralph, you really need to lock yourself into a recovery center. But we didn't have the finances for that. We didn't have insurance through the church that would cover that. And yeah, he said, you really need a good 28-day program. And I remember, you know, we couldn't afford a 28-day program. And so I just thought, one part of me was saying your goose is cooked, but I had another part of me saying, you've got these online resources, you've got these other good people working with you. If you just put some time into it, your higher power is going to find a way to help you make this work. And in my first month of recovery, something really freaky happened. I was sitting there in the parsonage with this good church job that was demanding a lot of my time, going to seminary, demanding a lot of my time, trying to sober up, which was taking every bit of my time that I had to spare. And I was wondering, how am I going to make this work? And then in December, we had a freak blizzard hit our area. Everything was shut down for a good 2 to 3 weeks. We had an ice storm, took out our power lines, no electric in the county that I live in. For a good 2 solid weeks, no electric. We had ice, we had snow that came in after the ice. The town was a mess. Everything was shut down for about 3 weeks. My higher power, through that freak blizzard, that freak ice storm, gave me my 28 days that I needed to just get away from the church, focus on my recovery, spend time in reading the big book of AA. You know, I couldn't talk to people online because no internet. I think they were wondering where I disappeared to for 3 weeks. But man, you know, I had time to read, I had time to meditate. And that's where, you know, there's a saying, when life gives you lemons make lemonade. And that's what I did. And that was my first really big clue that, yeah, there is a God. I don't know what to call the guy or the gal or whoever, but this entity is working for my benefit. And for 2 to 3 weeks, we had no power. We really didn't have roads open. I mean, it took about 3 weeks to clear the roads in our little rural country area after that blizzard. And so my ministry was just tending to myself and walking on foot in our local neighborhood, making sure that the elderly people in our church had heat, had some food, and doing what we could for them. But for the most part, they were local. They knew the drill. They were used to this kind of thing happening. And yeah, they were secure. They were safe. And so that was really the bulk of my time for that 3-week period was spent on Ralph, working on Ralph, and spending a lot of time in meditation. And yeah, I spent a lot of time with that candle. We had batteries. I could keep the music going for a little while. And yeah, just spent 3 hours a day in meditation, another hour of day in reading, maybe another hour or 2 walking around, making sure everybody else in the community was okay. And then the rest of the time was just me with my wife, you know, me and my family. Just hanging out, just talking, just, you know, spending time in group recovery, you might say, family recovery. And I still remember that. At that time, I had my doubts about the existence of God. But then, that one freak snowstorm, really, it was a bad thing that happened at the best time, the most perfect time for me in my recovery. And what I learned through further practice of meditation is that, yeah, I learned that there is a God. There's a God within, a God that we can touch within, a God that is both within me and outside of me. And I learned that I can commune with this God. And I'm still, 17 years later in recovery, still not really too sure what to call this entity. I know this entity has been called many names throughout the ages. When I was a Catholic, I would call it God, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. I would refer to this entity sometimes as Jesus. I know there are Buddhists out there that will refer to it as the Buddha nature. Hindus have so many different names for this one entity. And what I've come to believe, to learn from my own personal experience, is that we have this one entity, this one source of all that is available to all, that can be accessed through the simple practice of meditation. But this one source has been called so many things throughout the ages that it really has millions of different names, at least hundreds of thousands of different names. And I just choose to call it Source, Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, brother, so many different terms, but my default is just Source. I say to the God of my understanding every day, thank you for the gift of this day. Thanks for your presence. Thanks for keeping me in your plan. And what I've learned over the years, I no longer consider myself to be a person of faith, because through the practice of meditation, I've been able to touch this divine source and feel its existence, feel its presence within me. And I've come to realize that I exist because this divine source exists. This divine source brought me into existence through its own existence. And I believe very strongly that we are all different aspects of this one divine source. 8 billion people on the planet. We are all different reflections of this divine energy. And we all exist because this divine source exists. And this divine source can be seen in so many different ways. It can be very confusing. A lot of people look at religions like Hinduism and they think, how can you worship so many different gods? How can that not be idolatry? But actually, when you come to the enlightened point of view that there is one God, one source, but one source that is known in many, many different ways, many different facets to its being, so many different facets to this being who is the ground of all being, that really not only is God God, not only is Source God, not only can there be multiple different gods all connected to Source, but there are multiple different manifestations of Source that we call the universe. And Source is present within all those different manifestations, all the way down from the angels, all the way down to the demons, all the way down to that head of cabbage sitting in the bottom of your refrigerator, and maybe even the mold that's growing on that head of cabbage in the refrigerator. We are all connected. What gave me this realization is just a simple practice of spending a little bit of time in meditation every day. Started out with 3 hours. Over time, I kind of tapered off. Sometimes I fluctuate. Sometimes it's a half hour. Sometimes it's 3 hours. But I spend a little bit of time in meditation every day. And that time has taught me that, yeah, no way are we alone in the universe. No way are we left alone in this earthly life to try to make sense out of everything all by ourselves. We are connected to a higher power. There is a higher power out there working for our good if we only let it, if we only allow it. But so many of us make the mistake, and I made this mistake for years, of wanting to have things my own way, do things my own way, living in disharmony with the divine purpose rather than in harmony with the divine purpose, and just screwing up my life, and not just my life, but the lives of other people too, and not understanding why. Asking myself the question, why, if God is a kind, loving God, why is there evil in the world? Well, if God is a kind, loving God, why don't we spend more time working with this entity? Why don't we spend more time aligning ourselves with this energy, with this being, with this entity? And why don't we choose to live a life of harmony, living in harmony with the divine plan, rather than in total chaos, just out there doing our own things? And yeah, I've just come to so many different answers, so many different conclusions that really work for me. But I can't say that all my questions have been answered. They have not. But I have begun to see the purpose, the plan in all of it. And yeah, I think the ultimate realization is that, yeah, I know that God exists because I spend time talking to this entity every morning. When times get tough, we have a little conversation. Sometimes it's a glory be, sometimes it's another prayer, the more popular prayer, the God damn it. But yeah, for good or for bad, we're all talking to God. We are all connected to God. Do we choose to put that connection to good, wholesome use? Or do we just ignore it, go our own way, try to do our own thing? And we all have different duties. We all have different lives that we are called to live in this earthly plane, this material universe. And what works for one person is not going to work for another. But yeah, find God in your own way through the practice of meditation. And you can choose to call it God if you like. You can call it source. You can just call it an energy greater than yourself, a being greater than yourself. You can call it by many different names, know it in many different ways. And that's the beauty of spirituality. We all have the freedom to know, each according to our own light, each according to our own way. And no one can force their way on us. We have to make that choice by ourselves. But what meditation has taught me is that, yes, God exists. To me now, it seems obvious. And yeah, I know that this entity exists because we speak in meditation. This entity talks to me in my dream state. Things happen around me I cannot explain. Just weird synchronicities come about. And it's like, yeah, to me, it's perfectly obvious. Could it be coincidence? Yes, could be coincidence. Could it be a higher plan at work? That's why I've come to believe over the last 17 years. Yes, it is a higher plan at work. And the more I find out what this plan is for me, the more I learn to love it and just roll with it. So that's my answer. Does God exist? We talk on a daily basis. I feel that God exists. I cannot prove absolutely, concretely, but for me, yeah, it's a done deal. I'm like in the same category now as Carl Jung when he was asked, "Do you believe that God exists?" And he was an old man at that time. It's been a lot of time dealing with the God of his understanding through archetypal forms, and meditation. And he said, "No, I do not believe that God exists. I know." And when you can get to that point, leave faith behind, get to the point of knowing through your own personal experience, then yeah, you know that there is a higher power, and you can come into contact with that higher power and work with that higher power, each in their own way. So that's the stream for today. Thanks for dropping by. Catch you later, my friends. God bless. Bye-bye.